Welcome to Emotionally Aware, where we dive into the power of emotions and how understanding them can lead into a more fulfilling life. I'm Bihu, and today we are joined by Sanjeev Kumar, an SST teacher at St. Mary's. Thanks for being here, sir. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi Bihu. As you just mentioned, my name is Sanjeev and I take social science classes for students of standard 6 to 9. So for 6 to 10th actually, I teach social science, all the subjects, and 11th and 12th particularly, I take economics classes. So and also I'm particularly interested in those fields. So I would love if the conversation tilts in that direction.
That's great. It was a pleasure to have you here, sir. So let's dive in.
Thank you.
Emotional awareness is a term we hear more often these days, but it's still a little bit vague for some people. How would you define emotional awareness?
See, emotional awareness is actually a very esoteric term for the students. Even when I am in taking a class, then it becomes difficult for them, or difficult for me particularly, to make them understand emotional awareness. So for that, an easy term that has evolved these days is emotional intelligence. Now, still, people are aware about emotional intelligence, but they're not aware about awareness. Awareness is particularly related to knowing about your feelings. Now, students are actually going through a lot of things at any given point. They are going through peer pressure, they are going through family issues, or to some extent, if we go towards the college student, then they also face financial issues. Now, throughout the dealing with all of these issues, the most critical thing is dealing with your own emotions, because those are the things that govern your decisions in each of these issues, and that is where emotional awareness comes into play, and that is where its importance lies. So emotional awareness is particularly knowing about your emotions and also recognizing why you are feeling a particular type of thing, what is the reason for it, and how you can detach yourself, or if it is a good emotion, how you can attach with it for a longer period of time.
That makes sense. You just talked about emotional intelligence. Is both of them, emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, the same, or does it differ from each other?
See, in my opinion, more or like they are similar, because emotional intelligence is a broader term. Like if I have to call it, then I'll call emotional awareness a subset of emotional intelligence. Now, the scope, first difference is the scope in both of these things, because emotional awareness particularly focuses on recognizing and understanding the emotions, whereas emotional intelligence is a more application based skill, is more into applying that awareness into your daily lives. Also, see, awareness is about identification, and intelligence is about regulating yourself according to that identification. It is about bringing in productive changes into yourself, whereas awareness is just about recognizing and labeling it. So those are the key differences. So emotional intelligence is a broader term, and awareness is particularly a subset of it.
That makes sense. So it's not just about feeling emotions, but actually understanding them. Which brings me to my next question. What do you think is the biggest barrier to emotional awareness in today's fast paced world?
See, the biggest barrier in today's fast-paced world is the availability of information. In the current scenario, every now for now this thing goes on increasing with the decrease in ages. Like it is inversely proportional to your age. The younger you are, the more information you are fed with. Now, too much inundated with information children are actually the ones who are not aware about their own emotions. Now if I'm too aware of what is happening outside my body, I'll pay less and less attention to what is happening within me, whereas the latter is the most important part, and that is where this problem lies. So particularly about students, that is the problem, because first of all, they are not at an age where they can understand what they're feeling from within, right? Their subconscious and conscious minds are not that developed. Whereas if I talk about the older generations, then they don't have enough time to dedicate to knowing about their own selves. That is the problem for the younger versus the older generation. And across the spectrum, the biggest issue or the biggest obstacle that everyone faces in knowing about emotional, in knowing how about their own emotions, is particularly the amount of information that is fed in, and also they are less and less aware of how to of the process of knowing their own emotion. They are less and less aware of the techniques how to be more aware about your own emotions, and that is what needs to be popularized.
That makes a lot of sense. But for suppose you are experiencing such a moment where your emotions are running high and it's hard to stay aware, are there any certain tips you have for those moments in particular?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, sure. So let's say there are certain moments where your emotions are like running high and it's hard to stay aware of them. At that particular time, are there any certain tips that you would like to give?
There's just one simple technique. Take a break, take a pause, take a deep breath, and close your eyes. And think what you are feeling and what particular action of yours or others has caused that particular feeling. And that is the only and the easiest way of knowing your emotions and understanding your emotions. See, again, in the fast-paced world, as you mentioned, all of us, none of us actually has the time to take a break or take a sigh, and that becomes a problem. So, in any given situation, no matter how inundated you are with emotion, no matter how high your emotions are running, the primary important thing is to take a break, to think, and to think from within. Now, thinking can also be of two types. First is thinking about the materialistic things, thinking about, oh, what will I do tomorrow, or how will this thing affect me, how will this thing affect me. But what we forget thinking is, why is this thing affecting me? Why the questions which come from within are often neglected, and those are the ones which have to be focused when we are running high on emotions. Yeah.
I feel like that's also one of the leading cause for this can be busy schedules of people nowadays. Even kids and adults tend to have, with so many their parents pushing them into so many extracurriculars and stuff of that sort, where they stop regulating their emotions or understanding them in general. So, in this kind of a situation, how can you be aware? Uh,
See, talking to peers is one way, because if you talk particularly about the students, then they are often very sharing generation. They love to share about their feelings particularly, because as you grow older, you stop doing that. My parents, or even my generation, are not that keen to share their feelings. But the students, yes, they are. The students or the children, for them, the primary important people in their lives, if they name their top five, four will be their friends. And they place immense trust in their friends. So what we can guide them is that the friends they make need to be very wise, or the friends they make need to be trustable, because then those can be the channels of change. Those can be the channels through which their emotions can be processed, because they are the ones who are regulating these emotions. For children, they are too young to regulate their emotions themselves. They need someone else to guide them, and if that guiding light is sensible enough to tell them what is wrong and right, tell them how much is too much, or differentiate between right and wrong, then that can become a relief for them as well as their parents. So one way can be friends, knowing it through your friends. Second can be that, of course, now that it's a very generalized thing that children love to share with their friends. Some of the children are not that comfortable. Some are introvert, or some are generally not willing to share it. They're generally not willing to place trust on a stranger. Then what they can do is share your feelings, share your emotions with your family members, because there the trust factor is not that critical, because inherently you trust your family members. Then when they start doing that, and also your family members, no matter what happens, your family members will make you a priority unconditionally. Friends can have a vested interest, but family members will never have it. Then that factor also is made null and void in terms of family. So these are the two ways where if students or children themselves are not wise enough, aware enough, then they can be made aware through friends and family in different ways. Yeah.
That sounds incredibly helpful. Speaking of friends and families, how does emotional awareness impact our relationship? Because I would imagine it would play a huge role.
See, an emotionally aware person will also be aware of the other person's emotions, right? Because the first step is understanding your own emotions. So when you understand your own emotions, you understand the psyche of a normal human being. When you know that how actions affect your emotions, when you are aware of this particular process, then you also start understanding, then you also start channelizing the process in the other person's viewpoint. Now, when we understand the link between actions and emotions, then we also make sure that the other person, that our actions are in line with positive emotions. Our actions inspire positive emotions. So if we know that, for example, XYZ is wrong, XYZ will affect me negatively, XYZ will cause in negative emotions within me. So I'll also stay away, or I'll also do away with XYZ actions, which will invoke negative emotions in someone in someone I want to be in a relationship with, or in someone I am in a relationship with. So that is one aspect. The other is that if I am an emotionally aware person, then I can also be like in the previous part I talked about being a wise guide or being a wise channel of uh, making the other person aware. Then I can also be a good friend who can make the other person emotionally aware. I can also help the other person in becoming emotionally aware. That is the twin benefits of being emotionally aware. First of all, your relationships are improved, and secondly, you can help the other person become emotionally aware, and then that becomes a chain reaction. So your entire circle will give in positive vibes. If even one person is emotionally aware, then that becomes a beacon of light for the entire circle.
That was really helpful, especially in difficult conversations. Um, what are some signs that may show that someone may lack emotional awareness?
See, in my opinion, it becomes very easy to identify if someone is emotionally aware. First of all, an emotionally aware person will also be very self-aware. Now, that person will not be very too full of himself or herself. That person will take in self-deprecating jokes. That person will be comfortable in laughing on himself or herself. That person will also make sure that he or she doesn't become rude, or he or she knows what action are in their reaction. So an emotionally aware person is also very self-aware. Also, then that leads to the second point, which is an emotionally aware person will also be very self-regulated. That person will know. That person will know the difference between right and wrong. That person can separate. That person will know how much is too much and when to shut your lips. So that is another thing. Also, an emotionally aware person will have empathy, because emotions directly invoke empathy in a person. Emotions come from emotionally are essentially coming in from hormones, right? And hormones are designed in a way that we invoke empathy for fellow human beings. Lastly, I think an emotionally aware person will also have nice social skills, because once you are aware of your emotions and what actions are inspiring emotions, then you can also hold on to better conversations. You can also be, no, people pleaser will not be a very good word, but you can also make conversations fruitful for the other person. When you are emotionally aware, then people will want to listen to you, because then they are also getting inspired from what you say. So these are the particular signs of detecting that someone is emotionally aware.
Do you think mindfulness has any role to play in becoming more emotionally aware about oneself?
Yeah, mindfulness is the centripetal force around which emotional awareness revolves, right? So mindfulness actually plays a very significant role in enhancing emotional awareness, and also it because it invokes a very deeper understanding of one's emotions and also promotes their healthier responses. Now, how can it change relationships? Is mindfulness will not make you very judgmental. If you are mindful, if you understand, and if you're thinking too much, if you're thinking right about yourself and the other person, then the judgment that comes within you will uh, reduce in a manner, because then you will understand the other person's point of view. You will understand that why this person is doing this, and then no, the nothing will be black or white. Then everything becomes gray. Or when you are a very mindful person, because the core is to understand the other person's point of view. Then the difference between right and wrong becomes very very blur. Also, the person mindfulness will invoke emotional clarity in you, because emotional awareness is coming from mindfulness, right? And from emotional awareness comes emotional clarity. You can clearly distinguish between what makes you angry, what makes the other person angry, and then what makes you irritated. Now someone who's not emotionally aware will not know the difference between irritation and anger, but an emotionally aware person will know it. And how can he develop this technique or develop this skill? Through mindfulness. Moreover, again, just as I talked about empathy, mindfulness also will help in invoking empathy in you. And most importantly, mindfulness will trigger a lot of reduction in your stress levels. Because once you're not worried about what the others are saying or what the others are doing to you, once you understand the other person's point of view, then your stress levels will considerably reduce. Because then, if nothing is wrong, and if the only wrong person in the world is you, because if your actions are inspiring their reactions, and if everyone else what they're doing is justified from their point of view, then you will not have the high anxiety levels which currently majority of people in this fast-paced world have. These are the few ways in which mindfulness can help.
All of it is very true. Maybe after listening to all this, even I will inculcate it in my daily life. Um, we talked about how people get their emotions all over the place sometimes. So, are there any strategies people can use to avoid being overwhelmed by their emotions? Like any specific exercises or tools like journaling or meditation that can help build emotional awareness?
Yeah, you talked about journaling and meditation, so let's start with them. Now, journaling is for those who cannot think too much about themselves. Journaling is for those who are, at the bottom level of emotional awareness. So, if you are not able to think about yourself, if you are not able to process very well, then write, right? So for example, if you're not able to share your feelings with others, then what you do is you keep a diary, you keep a journal. Similarly, if you're not able to share your feelings with yourself, if you're not able to talk to yourself, then write to yourself. And that is where journaling comes into play. Writing about your emotions and how they are triggered will also help you in objectively differentiating between your emotions, and it will give you a very objective clarity about your emotions. Meditation, again, it's a very very useful exercise. And again, meditation can be of different types, right? Thankfully, meditation is something that originated in our own country, so that is why there is a lot of awareness about this thing. In outside in the rest of the world, we are not that level of understanding is not evolved pertaining to meditation. But fortunately, in our country, there are different techniques that we can use. The Ayush Ministry has prescribed several ways of meditating for different age groups, which can be helpful. So that those you can look up. Also, another thing that we talked about is mindfulness, right? Thinking. Thinking is the most important technique to become emotionally aware, right? Paying attention to small details about what you're doing, how is it coming, what action inspired this emotion, how are you feeling, were you not feeling this before, and what has changed your feelings. Mindfulness and thinking is something that is critical. And lastly, what I talked in the beginning, especially for the younger generations, just pause. Take a pause, take a deep breath, and think. You cannot do everything right every time. It's not possible. So it is important for everybody, especially the younger generations, to take a pause, think about what is happening to them, think about why it is happening to them, and then, if possible, try to distinguish between their feelings. Try to distinguish that if I'm feeling this thing, it is coming from this particular action. If I am feeling this thing, it is not coming from that particular action that maybe is stored within me for a long time and that has inspired this particular emotion. So that is important. Take a pause, reflect, and introspect. So these are the few things, and also, if possible, then try to seek feedback from others. So your friends, family, ask them how emotionally aware do you think I am, and then keep improving on that feedback.
That was really helpful. Um, you talked about children taking pause in their life specifically, but are there any techniques that help a targeted audience of children or teenager develop their emotional awareness from a very early age, so later in life they don't face the general issues that most of us as adults face?
Yeah, see, for if you're talking particularly about children, then one technique that has been used since centuries in our country is storytelling. Now, for younger generations, what they can relate to the most is storytelling, and even in the Panchtantra and Jakarta stories uh, that we hear, that we used to hear in our childhood days. Now, each of those stories has a moral, right? And each of those morals is attached to an ethical principle, is attached to a particular set of values. And those values, if the children understand, then those children will also understand the actions which inspire emotions. So storytelling, the grandmother stories, all of those things come into play, and all of those things are connected. See, the practices which used to be followed earlier have contributed to making this a better society. And those are the things which should not be abandoned. Storytelling is one of the most important ways of inspiring emotional awareness and emotional intelligence in the younger generations. Then other than that, we can also use several games, right? You can play games. Like, this is what I see happening these days, that there are many games that have come into picture in the recent scenario. For example, there are many startups that are working on this. There are many study materials. There's a lot of study material that has been developed regarding this. Particularly, for example, if you have to fill in a coloring book, then uh, anger is not always depicted in red color, right? The color of anger has shifted from red to blue, so that anger does not affect you in that manner. So those are the things. Many startups are also working on this. So you can Google up and check that out for the younger generations. Then, other than that, parents, the way parents interact with their children, it's not always about the child taking care of things. It's a larger share of burden lies on the parents, right? So parents have to keep their actions in check if they need to, because children are not in a condition where they can think too much or where they can understand too much. They're very naive, and that naivety should not be exploited by parents. Parents should also keep their actions in check. And other than that, I think the most effective way of invoking emotional awareness in children is having open dialogue within families. Because in every family, you will have people from different age groups. And each of those, if it is possible, then they should have open dialogue with each other, with one another. Because then their understanding will develop many folds. First of all, they are in one particular generation, and when they will understand the feelings and emotions of the other generation, then their understanding of emotions in general will grow rapidly. And that is the most effective technique. Having open dialogue, having circles where you can share your feelings openly without judgment, and you can also be that person with whom people can share their feelings without judgment, then that circle becomes the most effective tool for raising our emotional awareness. These are the few techniques, particularly to be employed for the younger generation. Yeah.
I really hope if there are some parents listening to this podcast, they take notes from you. And you also reminded me of my childhood talking about Panchatantra and stories and how morals, how a child's principles and core morals are developed somewhere down by their connection of intimacy that they form with their parents while they narrate stories and stuff of that sort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since there are many misconceptions about emotional awareness that people tend to have, would you like to talk about some of those and why do they happen at the very first place?
Yeah, see, these subjects are considered taboo. Now, since we are sitting in a tier one city, it is easier for us to discuss and talk about it in our elite circles. But when you go to the deep rooted traditional orthodox at the societies, at the bottom of the societal strata, they're not even aware of such concepts. So then that is the place where such misconceptions originate. And then through a bottom up approach, they reach the other levels of the society. So that is the way how such misconceptions originate. And some common misconceptions. First of all, see, people think that emotional awareness means being controlled by your emotions. Now, this essentially means that you are overwhelmed by your own feelings, which in reality is quite opposite. It ensures that you do not become overwhelmed by your feelings, because then you can partition your feelings into different categories, and then you can understand uh, each of those feelings as a separate one instead of being overwhelmed by them. That is one misconception. And another one is that emotional awareness often leads to overthinking, because if you're thinking about your emotions, then all the time you keep thinking. But again, this is also can't be further away from truth, because it actually helps us in differentiating our thoughts from our feelings. Because most of the times we think that if we are, thoughts are a different thing and feelings are different. And through emotional awareness, you can differentiate between the two. And that is actually something that keeps us away from overthinking. Because if you're not able to differentiate between the two, then we tend to mix them up, and then that causes anxiety. So that is the societal way of defining overthinking does not apply to emotional awareness. Also, another misconception is that emotional awareness is only a technique that should be used for ones who have mental health disorders, because they are the people who require such. It is often considered as a psychological treatment. That is also a very, narrow-minded way of putting it, because it is actually helpful for everybody. It is not a psychological concept, or it is not a therapeutic concept. It is actually something that should be the fundamental, bedrock of your mind, of the way you think. It should be the first thing that you learn before interacting with others. It's for everybody. It's a very generalized thing. You can't, pinpoint it and make it. You can't attach more stereotypes to it. That becomes a problem. Also, another thing is that people think that being emotionally aware also means that you have to be excessive empathetic towards other. Now, both these things are different. Being emotionally aware is one thing, but otherwise also you should be as empathetic as possible. one thing does not lead to the other, right? It is not a waste way to a mean, right? Both of them are a means or an end to themselves. We should not consider that if you are emotionally aware only, then you will be empathetic. Both are different. Both stand firmly on their own place. And we should not consider one as the means to another end. And these are the common misconceptions which, if the society is relieved of, then it will become a better place.
Very
Yeah.
true. One way that I feel these misconceptions can be normalized is by inculcating in our academics, especially in like school-based curriculums, where if students start learning about this from an early age, that also kind of reduces the rigidity or the walls that have been put on by the society as such. So, what's your take on this?
Yeah, actually, before talking about school-based curriculum, I think I should point it out that for colleges, this thing is actually happening. Recently, through the new education policy, in colleges particularly, they've introduced value-added courses, right?
Yeah.
And in those value-added courses, emotional intelligence is a prominent one. So this thing has started happening in colleges some 2 years ago. And also, if we talk about schools, now lately the education boards have realized the importance of this skill. I'll call it a skill, but essentially it is a value. So lately the education boards have realized the importance of it. And for example, in Delhi, when we see the happiness curriculum or the happiness classes that were introduced, like the first 1 hour of the school is dedicated to the happiness classes. That is one thing. So similar value added courses should be added in the school curriculum. And I think this is not something on which you can test people. Again, if you put this into theory, then the meaning is lost. The more practical it becomes, the better it is for the students. And how you can do it, how you can how you can bring it into the school curriculum or into the school practices. First of all, it's just as I said, it should be practical. It should not be theory based. It should not become another subject. It should not become a subject for the students. That is the key of how we should enact it. Another is that actually it will become more fruitful if the parents are involved, right? So if the school somehow manages to build a community, now this cannot happen in tier 2, tier 3 cities because the parents are busier and less dedicated towards their parents generally. But in tier 1 cities, it can be a pilot program can be launched. And for example, a few communities of parents can be built, which can provide feedback, right? So the way the children are progressing in terms of emotional awareness can then be taken to the parents community, and then they can give feedback. And through this to and fro relationship, the emotional awareness will develop among the students. Also, several, just as I said, the courses which are being introduced in the colleges, they should be introduced in the schools as well, and some amount of time should be dedicated to those. Also, I think, being a teacher myself, I think I will, an axe on the foot if I say this, but it is true that the timetables of the children are very hectic. Now, again, it is not, I won't say that it is the management's fault because they also have a stipulated amount of time during which they can conduct classes, right? And the amount of theory that they have to teach is massive. So even the days provided to them are not enough to cover the syllabus. But having said that, I think some amount of time every day should be reserved for just conversing. Should be reserved to just express yourself out in any way whatsoever. Every school, like for example, the government schools have those 1 hour happiness curriculum. Besides that, also we should come up with innovative ways wherein the children can express themselves. Just for example, in schools we have PT periods or the physical education classes. And that is one. But everybody is not that interested in playing. So when we say that, okay, we are letting the children develop social skills by giving them PT periods, that's not how it works, right? Because that is a very narrow way of looking at it again. What we can do is we should devise particular periods for every category of student. So if someone is interested in painting, then we can give more importance to the painting classes. If someone is interested in singing, then that they can go there. If someone is interested in nothing and just wants to sit and talk to his or her friend, that can also happen. So some amount of time every day should be dedicated to such activities. Then I think it will become interesting, and it will be interesting to watch how this thing develop. Then there are several mindfulness practices. For example, every day, if it is helpful, then every day 5 minutes of yoga or 5 minutes of meditation in every school, because then it can happen at a mass scale. Also, the children watch other children doing something, then the credibility of that particular exercise increases, right? Because if I see that my peers are also doing it, and if somehow I am able to see results in someone, then the proof or the evidence of those particular activities is well established. Then its adoption rate will increase massively. So the amount of guinea pigs is massive in schools. So this thing can be tested now. On a lighter note, if I say guinea pigs, massive in schools. So if it can be tested in schools, and if results can be seen by the children themselves in front of their eyes, then their adoption rate will also increase of such mindfulness practices. So these are few practices these are the few techniques through which we can introduce emotional awareness in school. And it will, of course, make the children better off than emotionally than they were before.
I wish I had a professor like you in school who would understand such basic things in such depth. Also, what a perfect way this was to end the podcast. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your insights with us today. I think our listeners will walk away with
My pleasure.
I think our listeners will walk away with some practical tools and better understanding of emotional awareness.